I'm here today to interview Brandon Rushing of Lee High School in Fairfax, Virginia, which just this year changed its name to John Lewis High School. Brandon Rushing won the 1995 state championship title at 135 pounds. Fun fact, his little brother beat me very convincingly when I was a freshman and he was a senior. I'll always remember that match because it was the first time I was really overmatched by an opponent, and it motivated me to try to reach a higher level of wrestling. Also, I want to thank everyone who came out to the wrestling trivia night on Tuesday night this week. It was a great event and raised more money than expected for coaching positions in Fairfax County. As always, please leave a review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts if you like this episode, and let's get rolling.
He taught me to get up when I didn't want to get up, when I wanted to quit.
I had high goals, man. I've always had high goals.
And so when I won it, I was just kind of like, oh my gosh, you guys are right.
It's not the thrill of winning. It's the joy of having that personal goal and being able to achieve that and walk off the mat with your head held high and with your hand up.
That just fueled my fire, and I was in every state championship match from there on until I graduated.
That was when I really started doing the kind of wrestling that I was capable of.
Anybody that steps in the ring and just decides to commit the entire time is a state champion in my book.
Welcome back to another episode of Back Points, a podcast where top wrestlers and coaches reveal their secrets about how they won state titles in high school wrestling. I'm excited to have Brandon Rushing joining us today, who won the state tournament in the 90s, and he's going to tell us about everything he knows about winning the state tournament and what he's been up to since. Brandon, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So when did you wrestle for Lee High School?
The fall of 91 through the spring, and I graduated in 95.
Okay. And you won, I believe, your senior year.
Actually, my junior year.
Okay.
Yep. My senior year, I got second.
So walk us through that. How did your high school career go? And were you new to wrestling? Had you wrestled? I think you went through some pretty great youth programs.
Right.
Walk us through your wrestling journey a bit.
So I started at 7 years old, and as I mentioned, Robinson Beltway program is where I started, and then we transitioned to the Springfield Beltway program, which at that point I transitioned out before the Bandits were started, and then started at Lee, my freshman year.
So how did you do your freshman year? How did that year turn out for you?
Won the district, got third in the region, and didn't place at state.
And what weight class was that?
That was 103.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I didn't mention this to you, or I may have mentioned this to you earlier, but I wrestled your brother. I was a freshman. It was my first year wrestling. He was a senior. It was 125. And I wrestled him at the Nova Classic and first round because he was probably ranked number 1 or number 2 or something like that. And he gave me a good drubbing.
Yeah, he's 5 years younger than me, so he graduated 99. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That would have been sounds about.
We're four grade year, 5 age years apart, but 4 for the grades. Yeah.
So you started at 103 your freshman year. And you had a pretty solid season. It sounds like third in the region and didn't place the states. But how was the sophomore year?
Sophomore year, I won the district, won the region, and again didn't place at states.
Okay. So then your junior year, you came out and you won. Did you win everything?
Yep. So I won district, region, and state, and didn't cut nearly as much weight that year. So.
And what weight class was that year?
I always get this confused if it's 125 or 130. One of those two. I always get between 125 and 135. My junior and senior year kind of blends together.
So what happened your senior year?
Senior year, I lost in double overtime. So that was a tough match. Aaron Bradley out of Lee Davis. Still remember those matches,
Those are some tough guys at Lee Davis. They've always had a very respectable program.
Yeah, did not really know those guys or that program up until that point, but yeah. And then he was a year younger than me, Aaron. He actually came to George Mason when I was there, so we were on the same team.
Oh wow!
For a year.
Yeah, how was that to be on the same team with him?
Oh, it's fine. In college, it's kind of a reset.
Sure.
There's a lot of state champs in the room, and even better. And so, yeah, no big deal. A lot of good. Yeah, it's you walk into high school, there's a lot of good wrestlers. You walk into college, it's even better. Almost everybody's a solid wrestler.
So you said you weren't familiar with the Lee Davis program too much in high school. Right. Did you guys stay in Northern Virginia for most of your matches? Did you get out of Northern Virginia a lot before the state tournament?
Yeah, we really didn't. We pretty much stayed in Northern Virginia. So that's probably why I didn't see many of the other programs. I mean, maybe an hour each way, we would go, but that's about it. Yeah. And I think our coach did that intentionally, for the competitiveness of our team. Just we didn't travel much and didn't really need to. We could get the competition we needed locally. Yeah. So,
were there other folks on your team that were competitive at the state level?
Yeah, we had. We my freshman through senior year, we always had between 2 and 4 guys qualify for states. Yeah. So Dan Doss was the coach. He had taken over, I think, in 1990. So, I mean, he did a really good job, again, getting kids out. I mean, we had typically 50, 60 kids in the room, to start the season. So, yeah, he did a solid job. We pretty much had a really competitive full lineup, top to bottom all 4 years.
So you made a comment that you didn't cut as much weight your junior year.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, freshman year and sophomore year too almost killed me. It was just a lot of weight, and everybody cuts weight differently. But it was just more than, when you start focusing more on cutting weight than wrestling, that's when the imbalance takes over. And so that's why I kind of backed off my junior year and just kind of focused more on the wrestling piece. And, I still cut weight, but nothing like those first 2 years. So it was much more enjoyable, and I could still be really competitive. I had, had my best year. So, I kind of took that same philosophy in my senior year. I maybe cut 5 pounds, 7 pounds, something like that, max. And, that was very manageable.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, I was just going to say that, then you don't have to focus your whole week on cutting weight. It's just kind of like the day before, miss a meal or two, no big deal. So
I think that wrestling has become a little more enlightened on this topic since you and I wrestled. I know I had a similar experience where I did cut more my freshman, my sophomore year. Now, I think that also had something to do with the lineup of the team and just kind of where my weight fell, where I wanted to be at a certain weight class that, that I had to cut some weight to get to. But I do think that, overall people are aware now of the advantages of being able to focus more on technique and strength and speed and recovery and not as much on just being the biggest guy in a particular weight class.
Right. And, there's a healthy factor in there too, that, cutting that much weight isn't the best for your body.
Yeah.
So you can throw that in there as well. And that was something, I first started coaching at Mount Vernon, I guess a year after college, and I wanted to get back into it. So I contacted Todd Reynolds. I lived in Mount Vernon at the time and coached there for 2 years. I was an assistant, varsity coach. And that's kind of when I told some of those kids, my philosophy was them, cut a little bit of weight. You don't want to go in there your same weight, but, focus more on wrestling, sport, technique, and put the weight cutting secondary, because sometimes, you see some of these kids, they just get wrapped up in it and think that that's like the thing to do and you have to do it. And it's just really not necessary. So to a large degree, you still got to do a little bit, but, not when, you're a freshman or sophomore growing and trying to cut 15, 20 pounds. That's just too much.
Yeah. I agree.
So they were just implementing the hydration and those protocols, in the early 2000s. So that was a positive move in the, 1 hour weigh in. So I think that helped as well.
I was wrestling right when they were trying to do that. I graduated in 2001, and it was all still very early, and so you could still do pretty much what you wanted in terms of weight cutting. But by my senior year, I think I happened to be doing it more intelligently, and not cutting as much. Did you think about nutrition in any kind of logical way? Were you coached on about how to eat right, or were you kind of going on your own on that?
Yeah, my parents and my assistant coach kind of helped me with that. But looking back, I mean, I don't know if it was just the education of nutrition or what they've learned now. I mean, it's just totally different than 20 years ago. So, yeah, that was a piece of it. But at the end of the day, I mean, you have to burn off more than you're putting in your body, no matter what so,
yeah.
And that last few pounds is typically water weight anyway. So, but I think nutrition is much more advanced today. And I think what's out there and how people do different things, there's a lot more techniques and things that are safer and just more knowledge on the subject in general, I think.
So what was the key difference, do you think, between your sophomore year where you didn't end up placing and your junior year where you won the whole thing, and then your senior year you also were in the finals? What was the key difference? It seems like there must have been a key developmental difference between those years.
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe it was just the second year of not placing at states. It kind of hit me I had to kind of step up the training, step up focus a little bit. I know, like I said, my assistant coach and head coach worked with me quite a bit. So I think it was just kind of all those things coming together. And I had my, record wise, I didn't have a great year. And I think we entered some more competitive tournaments, had more losses that year than I had the previous 2 years. But, when it mattered at the end of the year, things kind of lined up. You get a little lucky, work hard, and next thing you know, you've won the state and you're like, wow, that's crazy how that worked out. And then, going in your senior year, it just gives you that confidence. You're like, hey, you can do it again. So.
That's exciting. That's very interesting to me, though. So basically, the year you had the most competition and maybe the more losses was also the year you performed the best or peaked the best at the tournament.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what good coaches do. Put you in front of the best competition they can, just to so you see people that are better than you. I mean, that's really the only way to get better is competing against better talent, better kids. And kind of rising to the occasion versus, going against weaker kids and dominating, that's not really making you a better wrestler. So getting past the wins and losses and, focus on developing. And then, when it matters, tournament time, that's kind of the key when you got to turn it on and win.
So is there anything, so looking back, and you've now done coaching, both at the high school level and at the youth level, is there anything based on your experience that you would have either done differently for your own career, or that you would have, or that you now coach your kids in a certain way because of your experience?
Take top on a ride out. I always go back to that, but joking a little bit. But my senior year, I think that was the first year I didn't really know how that whole process worked, and first time I ever did it was in the state finals. And so strategy wise, it probably wasn't the best, but I don't know that I would have done much different. Maybe other than weight cutting those first 2 years. That's probably the number, probably the main thing. I probably cut more than I should have, because again, not only does it wear you down, but by the end of the year when it matters, I don't think I had a whole lot left in the tank when it you're just kind of burned out, mentally, physically exhausted. So, and that's when you need to be kind of at peak form and not, trending downward.
Yeah. I think that we overlook sometimes how important that motivation is, because we, especially when we're coaching other wrestlers, because, we sort of assume that people are bought into wrestling the same way that maybe we were. And so they can handle all kinds of weight cutting. And, the reality is that you really want all the guys to be having fun, to be really having a positive experience. And, and so overdoing it on something like weight cutting could really cut into that. I remember when I was wrestling, in retrospect, I do remember some guys who were talented who didn't make it all 4 years of wrestling. And
who knows how successful they would have been had they stayed. But the fact is it's probably better for the sport and for the teams to have the maximum retention rate of talented guys.
Yeah, it's a tough sport to coach, and it's a tough sport to participate in because there's some, it's an individual sport. It just takes so much discipline, between the weight cutting and the one-on-one. And it's, everyone knows it's a tough sport. So yeah, you see a lot of kids that just didn't do it all 4 years. And I think as a coach, motivating kids and working with them, I think people are a little bit more flexible now, but working with kids in different ways, and everybody's kind of motivated a different way and kind of has different goals. And I think people are more flexible of thinking that way. Some of the good coaches, Brian would be one that's been around, 20 plus years. I mean, the only way you get to that point in today's world being successful is being flexible on, just weights people want to go maybe, or maybe they have other commitments in their life that, if they miss a practice because of an academic thing, you're flexible. But maybe 20, 30 years ago, coach is like, sorry, if you miss a practice, that's it, So I think that's probably the most important thing as coaches, that, recognize that flexibility and find out what motivates each kid a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
And that's much harder with an individual sport because you have, 14 different personalities on the starting lineup, or however many weights there are today. But, versus, a football team, yes, there might be 11 positions on offense, but ultimately they're all pulling together, to do the same thing. So they are doing some individual points, but for the most part, it's a team sport. So it's different. I think that's what makes the sport so unique and so great, is, just all that discipline and hard work and effort that you got to put in individually to succeed.
Yeah. Now, did you set a goal specifically to be a state champion, or did you have other goals in mind?
No, I did. My older brother graduated from Lee in '86, and he didn't have the luxury of starting as a youth. He started his freshman year. And when my dad saw the sport, he fell in love with it. He didn't have that growing up, and he's like, "Oh, this is great. I got to get the other two into the sport." And that's why I started when I was 7, and my younger brother started when he was 5. So when I'd go in and watch him in the practice room, they always had the names up on the wall. And, at the time, Lee only had one state champion. And I just kind of remember looking up as a kid and saying, I want to see my name up there. So it's amazing how powerful just like seeing something in writing, on a wall can be so memorable and inspiring,
Yeah, I'm sure that's made a lot of state champions looking at that.
Yeah. So you're there every day. You're looking at it, all through practice. Things are tough. You look up there and you think about it. And yeah, so I think that's huge.
So, and you've said that your parents were very involved, or your father anyway was very involved. He got you into the sport, I guess.
Oh yeah. Yep. And, he was there, running or helping or coaching the youth programs that I was involved in. And yeah, neither of my parents missed any matches. I mean, they were both all in. And, my older brother was out of high school by then, but me and my brother both did the same Beltway teams. And so we traveled around and did that. And then in high school, I did 4 years and he did 4 years. And so, yeah, they were really involved and, love the sport and still love it to this day.
It's interesting though, because he wasn't a wrestler, your dad.
No, he did boxing. So it was kind of similar, but yeah, his high school didn't have wrestling, in Tennessee where I grew up. So when he saw it, he was like, oh, he could really relate. He's like, this is a great sport. And, and realized my size too. I wasn't probably going to be, starting quarterback on the football team, at 5'7", 110 pounds, my freshman year. So, he always kind of talks about that, all the different sports. He's like, this is probably a great sport for you. So.
Sounds like he was right.
Yep. I'm glad he did it, So now it's having, 4 kids and 3 daughters and finally having a son, number 4. So now it's, will he be interested in it? We'll see. So.
Did you play any sports outside of wrestling?
Yeah, I did lacrosse. I did a little bit of football.
Did you in high school?
No, I never did any other sport in high school. I always tell everyone I played freshman football, so I take that back. That was a lot of fun. But that was it. After you do the preseason in October and you finish up, doing AAU stuff in March, I was always just kind of spent, and it was a long season, so I never did, lacrosse or any other sports in high school.
Did you wrestle year round?
I did not. That's something my dad tried to get me to do a lot of freestyle. Freestyle never really interested me. I do a few tournaments. Something about the style of wrestling, I just never got interested. After March, doing the AAU stuff, I was kind of done. I started working outside my landscape business in the spring too. I don't know if that had something to do with it, but I was kind of one of those guys. I put in like 6 hard months, 5 hard months, depending on the year, and then I was like done. I wanted to shut it down. So I do camps in the summer, but that's about it.
You can grow a lot from camps though. So you would do like 5 hard months. So really, I mean, if you did camps over the summer, it sounds like maybe you would take the spring off.
Yep.
And then, or maybe the spring and part of the fall.
Yeah. Springtime, cut some grass, do some camps in the summer, and then, kind of hang out and wait for wrestling season in the fall. We do some running, some preseason stuff once or twice a week, but it was pretty low key.
Were there any exercises that you did that you found, very helpful, or that really you thought were critical to success?
I don't think anything in general. I think just kind of the basics: push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups. Kind of what most practices consisted of.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the camp thing. I mean, you can get a lot out of camps. I mean, I went to the Granby School of Wrestling for probably 5 or 6 years, long time. And I got a lot out of that because you're going to the same camp, learning it over and over, and their system is very, very fundamental and, kind of the same. It's tough. It's not your typical camp where, you're like hanging out and doing, wrestling camp, I guess all of them are kind of that way in general, but it was tough, but looking back, got a lot out of it.
I did 1 year at the Granby camps. And then every other year, I did all different camps throughout high school. So I did the Jay Robinson camps. That was probably the most memorable camp for me for obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm.
It was, but I did camps in Pennsylvania as well. And, in retrospect, it's an interesting idea to go to the same, if you know that there's a great camp where you really like the technique and you really want to do it in, it's an interesting idea to go to the same camp every time. That really, I don't think that ever occurred to me.
Yeah, that was kind of my thought. And I don't, know the first year you kind of like, oh, where am I going to go back? Oh, let's just try that again. And then, after the second year, like, I'm kind of getting the hang of that stuff. And next thing you know, you're incorporating it into your set of moves because you've drilled it hundreds and hundreds of times. It's a whole different style. I think that was appealing to me also because, you have a assistant coach that worked with me with different styles, but that was something totally new that, people at the beach were having success with. So it was kind of fun and enjoyable to incorporate some different technique and different moves.
Did you ever wrestle any of the Great Bridge guys?
I don't recall doing a lot. They were not big into live wrestling there. It was pretty much 3 technique sessions, and I don't remember ever wrestling any of them. My junior year in the finals, I wrestled a kid. Both of us, I guess, weren't really expected to make it, and we ended up in the finals. So, but that's the first time I'd seen him, and first Great Bridge kid I think I'd ever wrestled. So that's probably as close to them as I got. Yeah. So we did some other camps as went to the Bloomsburg team camp with Lee and Russ Houck's camp, and some different ones in Pennsylvania. Usually we do 2 camps a summer, but Granby was always a staple.
Would you go with your teammates?
Yeah, we did 2 of those out of the 4 years, and that was fun because it was more of a team. I think they would do 1 session of technique and then 2 sessions of like dual tournaments. So that was good. Different competition, but it's that team atmosphere more than individual. So I really enjoyed that. That was good.
So you and I have something in common. So we're both entrepreneurs.
Right.
Sounds like your current business goes back all the way to high school, though.
Yeah. I kind of started when I was 12. Officially, I incorporated the business when I was 18 in 1995. So we just celebrated 25 years this past January. Hard to believe.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I started a long time ago, and because I went to George Mason, I was able to keep it through college, or run it while I was in college, since I was so close by. So that by the time I graduated, it was enough that I could kind of sustain a career, and I just kept doing it.
So, and is it full service landscaping in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, or is it exclusively Virginia?
Primarily Fairfax County is our service area, and our specialty is residential maintenance. So mowing, fertilizing, leaf removal, just basically taking care of lawns and gardens on the residential setting. That's kind of our niche. And, we don't really get into commercial work or big landscape jobs. So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Any lessons from your wrestling days that have helped you with being an entrepreneur?
Oh yeah, I fall back on wrestling stuff all the time. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, anytime you're having a bad day, I mean, as an entrepreneur, I mean, there's tons of ups and downs, but you kind of, and that's what I always tell my kids when they're talking about whether they want to do sports or what sport and not doing sports. But I think that's what's great about sports. It teaches you, when you get kicked or you fall down, to get back up and push through it, especially the individual sports. I mean, there's no one else to look at, no one else to blame. It's all about the effort that you put in individually. And I kind of try to relate that into business all the time, that, if I'm not working hard, somebody else is coming behind me working harder and going to do more and be more successful. So I always relate back to those principles that I learned through wrestling, that, hard work and discipline, is kind of what fuels success, in my mind.
So you are still coaching. What are you up to these days?
Yeah, so a neighbor of mine, Tomas Avalle, and I took over the Hayfield Madhawks. The guy that had been running it retired. So we agreed to pick it up because we both got 2 youngsters. And we started that for the first year, and that was quite an adventure, getting back into coaching. And at a whole different level, the youth, I mean, it took an adjustment to, corralling kids anywhere from 5 years old to 13. But a lot of fun. We had it was a success, in our minds, because we got more kids out at the end of the year than in the beginning. So kids just kept coming. So we started out with maybe 13 kids and ended up with like 25. So it was
great.
That was good to see. Parents were great. So that was a lot of fun.
So will your kids all be going to, and by say your kids, I mean the kids in the Madhawks, are they all going through the Hayfield program, or do they split into different high schools?
Because Tomas was from Hayfield and I was from Lee, we basically kind of joined forces. We did one practice at Lee, one practice at Hayfield. The kids were kind of split. There was probably more Hayfield than Lee, just because that's where the foundation was with Roy Hill, in the Madhawks.
Yeah.
But the idea was to start bringing in some Springfield kids and feeding it into Lee, so hopefully over time there'll be more kids, it'll be more of an equal split. But then in the meantime, my kid, my oldest daughter, she started at Lee, and that was kind of fun to see her go back to the high school, which is now John Lewis High School. But now I recently moved. We just moved this spring to Clifton, so now my kids go to Robinson. I have 2 that'll go to Robinson. I have a 10th grader, 8th grader, and then 2 that'll go to Fairview Elementary. So that all kind of happened unexpected this spring.
So how? So your son will wrestle one day for Brian Hazard.
It's possible. I did the math, and I'm like, I don't know though. He's coming up on 25 years, and my kid's like 10 years. So, I mean, maybe if he's one of those coaches that can stay for 35, there's a chance.
All right. Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
How is COVID-19 affecting your plans for the youth program?
That's a good question. I mean, I think our initial thoughts are it's probably not going to happen. I know the organization, NVWF, that kind of is the governing body for all of our tournaments, they're trying to make some drastic changes, which, have some good plans, but I don't know how practical that's going to be this year. I mean, if I had to, the way things are going with school and what they're talking about, actually, they should have announced it today, what the high school sports are going to look like. I think that's kind of going to set the stage for what, the youth stuff's going to kind of fall right in line with that. And I think it's very doubtful that we'll be wrestling this winter, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree. I think the one plan that sounded like there was some optimism is where they would start the season December 15th and or somewhere around then, and then push it into March. I think that's going to be a difficult play, especially given the fact that things would need to change pretty drastically in terms of how many, infections there are, and is there a cure and all that, vaccine. And
it's just too soon to. You kind of see what they did with the school board. I mean, I felt for those school board and those people had to make those decisions to, move 190,000 students, and I don't know how many tens of thousands of teachers and staff, but it's already difficult to run the school system on a normal basis. And now you start doing a hybrid 2 days in, 3 days off. And, so if you translate that to athletics and you start switching spring to fall and fall, I don't know. I don't think it's going to work. Unfortunately, I think there's just too many moving pieces and liability, for the county, that it just doesn't seem feasible, unfortunately. Because I don't know what these kids really need. Sports, they need activities, they need that socialization, and that's probably going to be one of the biggest fallouts of this whole ordeal with the kids is the things they're missing out on, because they're just glued to devices and screens and not hang out and socialize and being kids as much as they should be.
I think there's going to be a lot of fallout. I think that'll be one of the big things. I think, how effective the virtual education is, that's also up for debate. For my own business, a part of my business is online education. And so I'm a huge proponent of that, but it's got to be rolled out in a very organized way. And if it's not, then it might not, it may have terrible outcomes.
And we kind of saw that this spring, when the school system, my youngest one was in a Montessori school, and in other private schools, they kind of started up day one on Monday and everything kind of rolled seamlessly. But again, 190,000 students, it didn't work for we had a elementary school and intermediate school. And, one of my 8th grader, she has special abilities, and she doesn't, you can't do that virtually. My high schooler is a good student. She could pick it up and did just fine with it. So there's definitely, with people's abilities and age, plays a big part in how successful it's going to be. I'm sure this fall will be better than it was in the spring. But wow, I just know my learning style. It's tough. Not everybody can learn 100% virtually.
Yeah. I think I now can learn tremendously well virtually, but I think it's taken me some years to understand how to do it and to practice it and all of that. And I can't imagine how you could just throw an entire school system or an entire nation into independent virtual learning like that and have it work out. So I feel for them as well. So to end on, I just want to give one more question here. If you had any advice to give to a young wrestler who's coming up, wants to win a state title, what's one thing you might tell them?
I think just kind of visualize it and set goals and work toward those goals every day. It's a long road, so you're not going to achieve it, in a couple months or a couple years. It's a long road. So I think that's the main thing, just kind of setting goals and focusing on it. That power of visualization is huge. Picturing yourself doing it, like looking on the wall and believing that you can be there. And there's a good chance, if you're working towards that as hard as you can, there's a good chance that it'll happen.
Brandon, thank you so much for joining us for Back Points today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. That was good chatting with you.
I know that the next generation of wrestlers is going to benefit from you, and I hope that a lot of kids come out for the Mat Hawks for you.
All right. Well, thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to Back Points today. If you want to support the show, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever else you find the show. Also, it helps us if you give the show a rating on Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Feel free to also make a donation via Patreon at patreon.com/backpoints. Thanks, and see you next episode.